All right, so we've been off the air for a couple of weeks. Haven't gotten to talk about the big undisputed fight of heavyweights between Oleksandr Usyk and Tyson Fury. One of the most significant fights in years. Obviously, the most significant heavyweight fight of the last 25 years. Incredible performance by Usyk. A great performance from Fury as well. What were some of your initial takeaways from that fight?
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching it, my reaction as I was watching it was like, wow, this is mesmerizingly high level boxing. Like lost in, all of the drama that was around this fight and everyone, wanting to play armchair psychologist when it comes to Tyson Fury and everyone's predictions and whatnot. These are two damn good boxers, and watching them jostling with one another and the all the games that are going on with the footwork and the feints and whatnot, that was such high level complex boxing. That was my takeaway from it. I thought that Usyk deserved the decision, but at the same time, I didn't walk away from that fight with less of an opinion of Tyson Fury. I think that Fury is a guy who is a magnificent boxer who ran into the one guy in the heavyweight division that he can't outbox. And maybe if you're going back and you're trying to retool a game plan for Fury, maybe you find a way to be a little bit more physical, but that's not how he treated this. He tried to outbox Oleksandr Usyk, and he ran into the ultimate chess master. My the other takeaway I had, and I'm going to tiptoe a little bit here because I know Sugar Hill, and we've worked together as commentators as well. I did feel like ultimately maybe one of the issues for Fury, and this happens, is that one thing that corners are tasked with is accurately scoring the fight on the fly. And I think that Fury's corner just they weren't scoring it well, or maybe more specifically, John Fury wasn't scoring it well, because I think that Shug was giving Fury very specific technical advice. He wanted him to plant his feet and he wanted to throw a check hook. He thought he could hurt Usyk if he could start leaning into that. It was clear that Tyson's father thought that he was ahead on the scorecards. And so the messaging to Fury, it was, okay, we want you to make these technical adjustments because we want you to be able to hurt him, not because you need to be able to hurt him. And so what
Sure.
that created was a little bit of a lack of urgency when maybe he needed it at times in that fight. And that was, it's just it was a fault in judgment on his corner's part that they didn't tell him, man, you need to win rounds, and if you're behind right now, so you're gonna need to hurt him. Not that it would be nice if you knocked him out, and so just a little twisted messaging might have made a difference to Fury in that fight. It might not, because Oleksandr Usyk is obviously one of the best fighters that we've seen in this era, and if not the best fighter on the planet today.
And there's no way to talk your way out of getting dropped and getting legitimately buzzed. I mean, there was,
Yes, that too.
there was what, three, four knockdowns scored there where he's hitting the ropes and the ref's not calling it, and then he hits the ropes and the ref's not calling it. Then on the third or fourth time he finally calls it. Like, there's no way to get around that. I've seen a few people whose like opinions in boxing that I trust that think that Fury won that fight, and I just can't see more than 4 or 5 rounds you could give him. But the amazing thing was how well Usyk started, touching him to the body, like you said, all the drop feints and everything. And then Fury makes this incredible adjustment, and he's boxing, he's using his jab, he's hurting Usyk to the body. And then Usyk, like Crawford, like Inoue, a lot of the greats, Canelo, he's just got that next level that he can go to when you're gas tank is starting to run low. He's actually got this whole other reserve where now I'm going to separate myself. And we've seen him do that in multiple fights he's having trouble with. If it's the Bellew fight, if it's the second Joshua fight, we've seen him overcome those things. And I think that that's really what makes him such a special fighter in this moment. And also, that he's the size that he is, having these performances against guys that are so much bigger. It's, for me, it's hard to argue that he's not an all-time great heavyweight, but I still see so many fans saying, "Oh, you can't put him in with the Alis and the Foremans and the Fraziers." And on one hand, I respect that opinion. On the other, those guys didn't have to fight guys that were 6'9", 280. And so I just think that there's like kind of a lack of context there, where his heavyweight career is incredibly short, but three of those are against to the other two best guys. And in from my perspective, he's beating them clearly.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. I think that one thing, just to build upon your point, one thing that is really impressive to me about Usyk in the ring, and it's kind of hard to describe this without being like too heavy-handed, but he's a master of snatching back momentum. And what
Yeah.
I mean by that is there were rounds even in that fight where Fury won the round, but say in the final 20 seconds of that round or so, it wasn't enough to win the fight, but he did something so that when Fury came out the next round, in his heart, he probably felt like, oh shit, I have to make an adjustment now. Like Usyk never lets a fight get fully out of his control. And part of that is having so many tools that you can try different things. And for him, that meant that Fury, there was never a period in the fight where you felt like Fury was going to run away with this. Even when he was hurting him to the body and whatnot, Usyk was always doing something that made Fury have to make an adjustment. When it comes to where we assess Usyk in the all-time list, like, listen, I understand, like, are you going to rank, when people say he's not an all-time heavyweight, I guess we have to quantify, like, what does that mean? Like, would I rank him ahead of Muhammad Ali right now? No. But are you going to make him like a top 20 heavyweight of all time? Like, why not? He's the best heavyweight of this era, seemingly, and he's done so in such an impressive fashion, and has done so by fighting from underneath, size wise, coming up from cruiserweight. Why not? I think that when we're saying that, like, let's quantify exactly what does all time great mean. Are we talking top 5? Are we talking top 10, top 20? Ultimately, all you can really say is Usyk will go down as the guy who cleaned out this division in his era. And that's all that he can achieve. He can't go back in time and fight George Foreman. He can't do any of those things. And also, when we're grading fighters and how great they are overall, sometimes you need a little bit of time and space for that context to fully flesh out, for us to consider when
Totally.
looking back how great some of these fighters are. We're even seeing that, I think, now with, like, people are having a new appreciation for fighters from the early 2000s and fighters from the 90s, like we're
Absolutely.
having people kind of relitigating like how great Oscar was. People think, people like to joke about Oscar in these different ways, but I've seen over the last couple of years within boxing circles, people are like, that fucker fought everyone,
Yeah.
like that. So I think that sometimes you just need time to fully consider how great these people are in the moment.
Hey, listen, I was actually talking about this with my friend the other night, but when I was a teenager, Burt Sugar had put out a book called The Top 100 Boxers of All Time. And I remember reading through that, and all the guys from his era were in the front, and then all the guys from my era were in the back. And trying to contextualize, like, okay, you have Barney Ross, whatever, number 7, but you have Roy Jones, number 88. And I can't figure out how you think that's true. But I think that you're right. Some time does have to go by for people to really see the entirety of the body of work to really appreciate, what it is that they've accomplished. Um, for me, I never try to go, oh, he's the number one guy, he's the best guy. I make the point that he's now got a seat at the table. And if you can't give him a seat at the table, I just think you're not enjoying, what is otherwise a great heavyweight. And by the way, Tyson Fury has a seat at that same table, at least as far as I'm
Sure.
concerned.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Like, and there's boxing does this in a way that other sports like don't do quite as much. We do see it, we see it in basketball. We see it less so in baseball, but I think basketball is a good comparison where we're always sort of like pointing back to a prior generation, and we're robbing ourselves of the joy of the present generation, right? And, like, just allow yourself to appreciate what you're seeing rather than say, wow, this guy couldn't like couldn't beat Jack Dempsey or what. Like, we don't know that. And also, again, like, going back to what we're talking about, like, we're not able to put the context of this generation together. And the other point you made was a good one too, about, like, who is the teller of history. And right now it's kind of our generation now that gets to be the sort of authorities on these rankings and these lists. And you compare it to, how we talk about music, for example, right? Like, Apple Music just put out their 100 greatest albums of all time the other day, and people are debating that online. And ultimately, the cast of characters putting that together are different from the ones that put Rolling Stone's list together a couple of years ago. They're younger, and so you'll see stuff like a Frank Ocean album in the top 10 and whatnot. Like, so we're seeing kind of what has resonated with this generation is going to be different from, you know, what Burt Sugar saw and who he thinks is the greatest. And they all belong at that table. And if we want to have a fun discussion about who would beat who or whose body of work is better, I think all that is fair. But I think you should, just for your own enjoyment of the sport, to, in your words, allow these people to sit at the table too.